Hello, hello. I'm super excited to be here, and I have prepared a whole deck. But before I begin my own, introduction and content, I wanted to say a big thank you to the LeadDev team. This conference has been amazing, and I hope that you all will agree. I'm learning a lot. I'm hoping that you guys are learning a lot too. So thank you. And also, thank you to Inez, because you may not realize, but she's actually putting in a lot of effort. She pronounced my name right. And so thank you for that. Thank you for coming to my talk today. Just for the record, I've only seen bits and pieces of National Treasure. I watched my husband watching it. And if it helps you, Encanto is more my speed. That's the last movie I saw end to end with my 9-year-old. And hopefully now you know everything about my soul, right? So to introduce myself, I'm from Bloomberg Engineering. I'm from Trading and Analytics Group. What it means is that I get to work on super cool trading apps. Besides that, I'm also the co-chair of the Distributed Systems Guild. And I participate and I sit on the D&I board for all tech communities in Bloomberg. So the word guild is difficult to pronounce, and it may evoke some kind of secret association kind of image in your mind, right? But it's not very secretive. We are a group of volunteers. It's a very grassroots kind of organization that's internal to Bloomberg. And what we do is we share knowledge and best practices. It's around a technical area of interest. So my passion is distributed systems, and that's why I chose to be involved there. So today, I'm not going to talk about distributed systems. Today, we are going to talk about how to increase inclusion and collaboration through code reviews. And I'm super excited to talk about this because we train our engineers a lot. And when I say we, I mean the tech community, on design principles, on coding, on how to do testing. But we rarely talk about how to do code reviews well, right? Do you have any training on code reviews? Can I see any hands up? If your company has, I do see one hand up, so that's great. Kudos to you. I see 2 hands. All right, so through this talk, I'm hoping to share my experience with you, and if you see something amiss, come find me. Maybe I'll learn from you. Let's go. So I'm going to give you the key takeaway right now, and the key takeaway from this talk is think consciously about what works for your team, what is working, and what your code review process could be. So your teams are already doing it, right? It affects our daily life. If you could do even one thing better, it would have a huge positive impact on your product, on your team, and hopefully help you become a big manager someday. All right, so what is an effective code review? I define it as a socio-technical engineering practice, and that's a mouthful, right? But basically what I did was I put socio in front of the technical process to explain and to kind of focus on the social aspect of it. No matter what tool, and I'm not going to suggest that you use any specific tool, you are free to use what you like, but always keep in mind and help your team understand there's a human being sitting behind that tool, right? So I have 2 beautiful stick figures here, which actually my 12-year-old helped me design. So they're talking to each other. Do you think they're saying the same thing or they're saying different things? The truth is, you never know, right? So in communication, you never know. To find some protocol that works, you have to find some way to confirm what the other person is saying. And same happens in code review. So there's a graph I want you to look at. Here On the x-axis, you have the review speed. On the y-axis, you have the feedback value. And hey, everybody wants high feedback value, high speed. At least I always want to be in the power quadrant, right? But real life, that's not possible all the time. So as a product owner, as an engineering manager, or as a team lead, you have to decide for your team which quadrant do you want to be in if you cannot be in the power. So if you're building a prototype, right, you're building a version 0, it's okay to do omissible, that is high review speed, but you give low feedback value. However, if you have a mature product, then you want to give high feedback value, and you should be okay with low speed. So in our case, we choose to be in the value quadrant. So now I will show you another pyramid. And since I have seen the talks yesterday, I know that Andrew and Matt have already shown you some interesting pyramids. And I think maybe that's how we engineers think, right? So let's look at Maslow's hierarchy of code reviews. Yes, it's going to be a pyramid. The first and foremost in a code review, you want it to code correctness. If you're not making sure that the requirements are met, then hey, it's meaningless. Next, you make sure it's secure. You're not adding any more holes. You're not giving access to data that you shouldn't. Third, readability. So you're in the code review, you have to make sure your code is readable. And at sometimes you will get a pushback. Readable? Who cares about readability, right? We need to just push product out fast. And to that person, I would say that go back and look at your own code that you wrote 6 months back. I can guarantee you that that person won't understand their own code. And so if we don't keep our code readable, it's tough to maintain, especially if you have hundreds of apps, right? You want to be able to move from one app to another easily. Next is elegance. So beyond readability, you want, let's say, you have a problem, you find end solutions. And there's a beautiful solution, which is the most optimum, and that's the most elegant, and that's where a code review can help you. Maybe an expert can say, hey, I've seen this problem before, let me help you solve it right. Or maybe the code reviewer learns from the author, and that is inspirational. So if a code reviewer is actually learning by doing code reviews, that is inspirational code review. And to be honest, I have learned a lot from code reviews, so I'm one of those weird people that I like doing code reviews. But the biggest thing of all these is inclusion. And that's an assumption we go in with, right? That the author and the code reviewer will feel included, will feel heard. But as a lead, as a manager, you have to make sure the process caters to them both. So you have to keep some form of, you have to decide some protocol up ahead so that both parties feel included. And ideally, you want to have diverse set of code reviewers, and I'm going to mention that again. The reason being, and when I say diverse, I mean it could be experience level, maybe somebody who's new to the team, and bring them into your code review process. So code review, inclusive code review will help you catch issues early on. That's the best phase, right? Nobody comes to know. The QA doesn't come to know. The product doesn't come to know. The client definitely doesn't know. It is super helpful in maintaining consistent code base. And if you have more than a few applications, that's super helpful in creating backups. If I own 50 apps, there's no way I can know all the code, right? If a production problem comes in, I want to jump right in. And if there's consistency, it's easier for me to fix the issue. Beyond that, code review can help spread knowledge. So how we use it in our team, we actually involve anybody who's joined the team recently as soon as possible in multiple code reviews so that they can see our culture, right? So they can see it's okay to ask questions. And not only okay to ask questions, you expect an answer. And if somebody is not able to give you a simple answer, then there's a bigger problem, right? Beyond the spreading of knowledge, what it does is a code review will help you create for the author sounding boards for next phase. So a product never goes at version 1. You always have 2, 3, 4. So what it'll help the author do is create sounding boards for the next phase. We go beyond this in our team, and we say that if you review code, you actually take ownership of the code. So if I approve a PR and the product does well, then I get credit for it. And that creates a sense of collective ownership. And the flip works too. So in case something doesn't go well, the lessons from it, both the author and the code reviewer take, right? So let's go ahead. We've talked a lot about tech debt in the past talks. I believe that code review is a great tool that can help you reduce tech debt. And I'm sure that people in this room never take on tech debt, right? But what code review can help you do is, if you have to, then you take it consciously. And in case you have legacy applications, it'll help you chip away at the tech debt. So the common frustrations that I've heard about for code review process, insufficient background information. So the code reviewer will feel that, hey, I have to go talk to the author, takes too much time. And towards that, what you can do as a lead, you decide a template, and you say, this is what we're going to put on every PR. So put the description, the solution, how you're going to release, the dependencies, everything. Beyond that, decide a timeline. Say, as a team, we will give PRs higher priority. So if somebody is sending you a code review, that means they're ready to go to beta. So that's what we do. I know that if I send somebody a PR, it will get looked at quickly. And that's what I owe all other team members. Some people feel that it takes too much time and effort. And this usually comes from people who feel that doing code reviews is not part of their job, right? And that is something you can set straight. You can say, hey, this is just what we do. It's part of our process. It helps the whole team. So in a code review, you might get unproductive comments, and that happens. Sometimes people are busy. They may write something in which in their mind was the right thing. I'm going to discuss some tips and tricks that you can use around it. Sometimes people feel that the feedback drags on. Yes, for a big PR, that is possible. So small PRs are beautiful. I think all engineers agree on that. And valuable feedback might get lost, right? So and you always need a relationship outside of tools. So no matter what nifty tool you come up with, end of the day, your team needs to have relationships beyond these tools. And that's the key thing here, that even if you discuss outside, you have some kind of conclusion, just come back, put it on the tool. So how do we make the process better? The first and foremost thing is you have to ask your team how they feel about the process or how they feel about the code reviewer. Do they look at the code reviewer as somebody who's just poking holes? Or do they look at the code reviewer and look at them as an ally or a superhero? And I've looked at tons of code. Finding issues by just looking at code, trust me, is tough. So if somebody is doing that for me, I respect and admire them, right? So that's the first and foremost thing. These are just reading modes that maybe you need to be aware of when you are going into a code review. Your team has to decide how they're going to take care of their code review. Ad hoc is just random. You jump right in. Checklist based. For this, your team actually needs to have a checklist. Hopefully, the checklist that I'm going to discuss later will help you maybe create one for your team. Scenario-based is if you're fixing something very specific for a bug, you definitely need to know what was the problem before you review somebody's code. And last but not the least, test-driven. Right? So I have 2 checklists, one for the author, one for the reviewer. Feel free to create your own. This is just, and that's why you see a lot of content in the slides, because I just wanted it to be complete. So for the author, the first and foremost thing is you go in assuming positive intent. That if I get any feedback that that person is trying to help me make a better product, and while you may be the expert, right? You've done your research, the person definitely knows more than anybody else, so they may be the expert, but it's totally possible that somebody asks a basic question and it shifts the direction of your solution. So while, yes, it's a very late stage, but you go in thinking, I will learn something. Maybe you will come up with a better solution. Before you send out a PR, do your own code review, right? So that at least the minor stuff is caught. Request code review from 2 or more people. There's research to back this. If you have just one person, it's very likely that one person will agree with you. In fact, if it's a decent-sized project, very likely you are working with the person already, they've reviewed your design, they agree with you. By the time you get to code review, they already agree with you, right? Or maybe the questions they'll ask you are different from somebody who's new into the team. So if somebody is new in the team, they'll ask you basic questions, but you have to be able to respond to those. And again, create a well-rounded PR. All that means is decide on a template, stick to it. You want to automate as much as possible, depending on your product. We automate formatting, compliance checks. Small PRs are beautiful. However, real life happens. You can have big PRs too, right? If you have a big PR, my biggest suggestion is stick in some kind of estimate for the code review in your project. And I'm pretty sure that most people don't do that. Does anybody actually estimate time for code review and add it in? So that the suggestion is mainly from my experience, because in the end, code review takes time, right? Anything good that you want to do will take time. So you have to treat it like part of the project. The author has to sit with whoever he wants, the people he wants to look at the code with, has to give some kind of documentation, give background, and request a timeline. That, hey, this is my deadline. Can you finish the code review by then? And if they can't, you find a replacement. And you may think that, oh, that's basic. Like if somebody doesn't have time, yes. But as an engineer, I think our instinct is to find the expert and always want them to look at our code. But what I have learned over time is that it's better to have somebody who may not be the expert, but they spend the time and they give you attention. So find somebody who has time for you. Respond to vague or unclear comments with collaborative questions. And this is specifically in case, one, sometimes I just assume that maybe English is not their first language, right? People use different words to say different things. It's easy to ask why. And beyond asking why, you can always pick up the phone, do a Zoom call. However, discussions are easier. So don't take comments personally. Everybody's just trying to make better code, better product, ship out the best thing. Ack every comment. And again, this seems simple, but if you have a few hundred comments, depending on the size of your project, it's better to ack everything so that each conversation is resolved. And add unit tests. So for the reviewer's checklist, code review is not a favor, right? So sometimes when engineers feel that it's not part of their job, they may kind of push it to a lower priority item, never get to it, so the author has to literally run after the code reviewers. And that's not a great situation for anybody. Decide on an SLA, and I mean service level agreement, so the whole team should be aware what template you're going to use and what time frame is expected. So in our case, our time frame is a week, right, for any decent sized project. And the good part is, no matter who does it, so who's sending the PR, they know that it'll be done quickly, and the feedback value will be high. So another basic thing, understand the logic or design while reviewing. So many times, people will come to you and maybe they fixed an issue and they will want to move it out to production, and they'll say, just say it looks good to me, right? And it's very easy for me to say, you should say no, but I have been in those situations where I have actually done that. I have said, yes, let's go with it, and it creates bigger issues in productions. So from experience, I've learned that it's better to say no. It's better to be uncomfortable in that moment and say, let's delay this project. Let's take a few days and do it right. Because if you have a production issue, now you've affected the client, you've affected other teams, and everybody else. So ask clarifying. So I have a few language suggestions. If you ask clarifying questions, you'll get a better response from the author. So instead of saying, we don't need this line, which is a statement, you could say, why do we need this line? Right? You want to understand their perspective. Maybe you're even the expert, and you'll have a discussion about it. Use inclusive language. So instead of saying your spacing is inconsistent, you could say, we could keep the formatting consistent by doing X, Y, Z. Do not use vague language. So instead of saying something like this code is messy, which is an odd statement in itself because it's not helpful at all, you have to be specific. So you have to say we could make this code easier to read by doing X, Y, Z, and now you're kind of mentoring the other person. You're helping them learn more and hopefully building a better relationship. Give actionable feedback. So if you give logic for your feedback, it's very likely that the author will accept it. So if you say something like, break this into 2 objects so that it's cleaner, then they will have to come up with some reason to say no. Review the code, not the person. So if you try to steer away from you and use we, instead it gives a feeling of, we are on the same side, I'm trying to help you, let's do this together, right? So instead of saying, you added inconsistent naming, you could say, to make the naming consistent, let's do X, Y, Z, and now you're helping them learn new tools or whatever. For pre-existing issues, this is especially true for legacy applications. If you do your code review well, you will probably find issues, right? But again, end of the day, you have to have some discussion with the author as a code reviewer in terms of whether that will get resolved in this PR or a separate PR. In my mind, the author should drive the code review process. However, if they don't, maybe they're new to the company, new to the team, as a code reviewer, you can drive the process. You can set up the meetings. You can break big PRs into smaller chunks. So if I get 10,000 lines of code that I have to review, then what I do is I set up the meetings, and I know this is my limit. Beyond 1 hour, if I stare at the code, I will not find any issues. And so I book my own time, and I go through the whole code slowly. Use collaborative, empathic language. I've already mentioned this. Develop a relationship with the person outside the tool. And most of all, make your intention to help be explicitly known. The reason being, sometimes if I let my intention be known, the other person can ignore some words if I were to use some wrong words. Find a balance between being direct and overly critical. And so I'm not requesting you to write flowery language or long letters in whichever tool you use for code review, but before you submit your comments, just look at them once, how the other person would feel reading it, and keep iterating. So the idea is not that you just put your code review comments and then you're done. As a code reviewer, you may be the expert. And so you have to make sure all threads get resolved. And keep an eye out for scope creep, right? Scope creep is real. We definitely don't want to make humongous changes depending, again, on your product. Thank you. Those were the only suggestions I had. Come find me at the office hours.